Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Dean, and I've been CEO of Save the Rhino International since 2001. And I'm really happy to be joined today by Greg Fox, who is the CEO of Mahlatini Luxury Travel. This year, we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of our partnership with Mahlatini. Greg, it's really lovely to talk to you. Hello.
Hi, Kathy. How wonderful to be here with you. It's such a special milestone to be able to celebrate 10 years working with you guys. It's been a wonderful 10 years, which we've seen so much change in our respective businesses, but also on the ground in terms of rhinos and greater conservation. It's been an interesting 10 years, I think, with the last couple from COVID. But yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to the next half an hour or so, and look forward to chatting through various things with you.
Great, thanks, Greg. Yeah, it's a lovely occasion, our 10th anniversary, and I was just reflecting kind of before this call on how much has changed, not just since 2001 when I first joined Save the Rhino, but since our partnership began in 2013. And just to paint a very broad brushstroke, when I began at Save the Rhino, rhino numbers were a lot different. There were far fewer black and white rhinos. There were thought to be many more Sumatran and Javan rhinos to what we think now. Indian rhinos, we knew the numbers, but they were pretty low. But actually, we had a really nice problem after the poaching crisis of the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. We'd gotten over the poaching crisis, and in a way the biggest problem was finding new suitable protected areas for these expanding rhino populations. And so yeah, the job in back then was actually a really nice one. We didn't have all the headaches that we've had recently. And of course that unfortunately that changed when the poaching crisis began in Africa. I'm talking about in 2008 in Zimbabwe, where there was a lot of civil and social unrest, which made the national parks and so on a particularly soft target. And then it really spread like a wildfire, with poaching moving to South Africa, Namibia, Kenya. And I was just looking back at the poaching stats. And when our partnership started in 2013, actually, that was Kenya's worst year for poaching. It was 59 animals. Now, 59 doesn't sound a lot when you think that across the whole of Africa, it was about 1,200 animals killed that year. But as a percentage of Kenya's rhino population, it was huge. You know, rhinos... Gosh, I wish when they bred that they had twins and triplets. Life would be so much easier. But they have one calf at a time. They typically have an intercalving, and the gestation period is 16 months. They typically have an intercalving interval of 2.5, 3 years. They're slow breeders. It takes a long time to build up your rhino populations. And so losing 59 animals as a large percentage of the population, they typically increase, and all the national strategies aim for an annual growth rate of 5%. And if you're losing 5, 6, 7% of your rhinos due to poaching, plus the natural mortalities, that sets your rhino breeding program back a long time. So yeah, 2013 was a bad year for Kenya. I have to say the worst year for South Africa was the following year in 2014, when it was about 1,200 animals killed. I think the poaching crisis, it's gone up and down. It's moved around through the African rhino range states according to which are the softest targets. Poachers, unfortunately, are very good at reacting and shifting their focus. But if for 2021, the most recent year for which we have poaching figures, it was 501 animals killed. Now that's 501 animals too many, but it's retrievable. I think we're getting somewhere. And I think, you know, a lot of people have come together to work on this. Greg, I don't know what your perspective is. You know, I wonder, do your clients ask you about rhino poaching when they're going to visit rhino range states in Africa?
I think, well, to go back to your first part of your question, I mean, it's been amazing to see the changes in rhino poaching through that whole period, where you sort of started where everything was great. We were recovering rhinos. We'd had, like you say, the 70s, 80s, and 90s were massive destruction not only rhino populations but elephant populations, and things were being wiped out left, right, and center, to suddenly this period of stability and focus and growth in terms of protected areas, and seeing year on year these massive increases. I mean, I can just from a personal perspective talk of going to the Kruger as a young person and never seeing a rhino until you were kind of seeing rhinos at every corner. And I think, through a large number of different initiatives, and the fact that it has been highlighted by organizations like Save the Rhino and various tourism bodies and what have you, it's become more and more prevalent in terms of how we've highlighted the crisis on the ground, and what is actually happening. And people are starting to understand the crisis that is there, and the charities and the conservation bodies and the lodges and the national parks, and everyone has really pulled together to fight what is really a war. I mean, it is astounding, and you just have to visit these areas and go and see them to see how visible these initiatives are on the ground compared to what they were 10, 15 years ago. You didn't see a anti-poaching patrol. Now you can't go to a national park or a conservancy or anything without seeing very, very visible anti-poaching controls for not only rhino but general game as well. And I think it's only probably going to grow from there. As populations grow, pressure on these environments grow. Sadly, for many communities that surround these areas, poaching is the only way they can feed themselves. Well, it's a massive temptation because it's an easy way out. And that's where these community-based partnerships and working with the surrounding areas, getting the communities actually having ownership of these areas and become very involved, is the key to, I think, conserving these into the future. And then to go on to your second question, in terms of our clients and tourism in general, I think people are becoming more and more aware of what is happening on the ground, and also more discerning, more interested to know where their money is going. They don't want to just sort of pay to go on and have, there's a rhino, there's this, and move on. They want to know that that rhino is being conserved, that things are being done sustainably, that parts are being looked after, communities are being looked after. And it's certainly something a trend that we're noticing more and more, as people want to be more involved in what actually happens on the ground. There's a lot of give back, which in the past there always has been, but certainly not to the levels that we see now. And an expectation from businesses like us that we are involved in sustainable practices and conservation efforts in a broader picture to make sure that we conserve what is all of our heritage for the future.
Yeah, I think, and thinking about your clients going to visit the destinations where the protected areas and the national parks, conservancies, or community areas like in Namibia and Damaraland, where I think you've been yourself to track rhinos, but I know that we really like it when our donors are well informed, and sometimes when they ask us tough questions. And for example, and I think looking at where your clients go, Kenya, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia, South Africa, all fantastic countries in which to see rhinos and other wildlife. I guess you're hoping that your clients have also done their research and that they're kind of really interested in the places that they're going and the viewing experiences that they might have. I wondered, maybe you could talk about some of your own rhino encounters, maybe in Damaraland.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think from that, we kind of mentioned it a little earlier, but my first rhino experience, which was when I was 12, in a wonderful park called Lapalala in the Waterberg in South Africa, was on foot walking through a thicket and landing on a big rhino bull who then charged past us, which kind of set the tone for years to come. And then, like I say, I've had the privilege of going and tracking rhino in Damaraland, which is, for me, one of the most incredible experiences I've ever done. For starters, it's essentially like a moonscape. So the landscape is just incredible. And the fact that a black rhino of all animals can actually survive in an environment like that, living on euphorbia and other toxic bushes and what have you, is quite incredible. And yeah, and to just go and see the conservation efforts and the amount of work that goes in just to maintain those last remaining pockets of black rhino populations in the desert is extraordinary. I mean, it's worth every penny that it costs to go and see it, and I certainly would strongly recommend it to anyone wanting to go and just see things in their natural environment as they should be, but also get the picture behind it, see the communities involved in that conservation, where that money for conservation actually goes. So, protecting, to the rangers, to the research, and to the communities, and getting everyone involved and understanding that, these animals have a much bigger role to play than just, there's a rhino in the background and we don't want to lose it. That rhino brings income to communities. It also brings focus to communities. It creates education. It creates travel. It brings income to areas and slowly builds things up, or not slowly, very quickly builds things up. And in an area like Damaraland, where there really is little else that can be done there, just purely because it is so dry and desolate. It's not somewhere you can farm massive commercial farms or anything like that. So these landscapes and areas and the wildlife within it are invaluable, and that's just one small part of the bigger picture. But we've got similar things with Lewa and how they've operated in Kenya, across to the big national parks in South Africa like Kruger and Shishlu-Mfolozi, and all the history around rhino conservation there. And it's about conserving this, but looking at the bigger picture, because while poaching is the biggest direct threat, it's the indirect threats which actually in the long run are what lead to poaching, what lead to habitat loss, which is probably the single most worrying threat to all wildlife conservation the world over, with our populations, human populations growing like they are, and resources becoming less and less and less, and people more often out of desperation than anything else. I don't think anyone goes into anything wanting to go and kill a rhino, but when you're starving and you have no way out, well, it's an easy target, and that's the sad reality of kind of the world we live in now. So it's through education and tourism and ownership and that sort of thing that we can highlight these issues to the bigger global kind of audience. And we are doing that, and through wonderful organizations like yourselves, like Save the Rhino. You guys have done an immense job in highlighting the plight of the rhino and the bigger picture to the rest of the world and what is actually happening out there. And not only are you doing that, you're actually making a difference on the ground, which is incredible.
Yeah, and it's a point I wanted to make is that actually Save the Rhino, our team are based in London. We are really, we act, if you like, as the middleman between the field programs on the ground and between supporters all over the world who want to help rhino conservation. So we find partners on the ground, thinking in the Kanani region of Namibia that we were talking about with Save the Rhino Trust. That was one of the programs we started supporting the first year when we were first formed back in 1994, so almost 30 years ago. And Save the Rhino Trust is a great example. I know that Mahlatini is really keen on the 3 pillars of community, wildlife, and the environment, ecosystems as a whole. And Save the Rhino Trust, I mean, it's an interesting story. It was set up by a woman called Blythe Luty in the early 90s during the previous poaching crisis. And she recruited a few local people from the communities and trained them to track rhinos across that incredible desert landscape. And they would record sightings, and there would be a bit of a deterrent presence for poachers, but really trying to get a grip on the rhino population and how it was performing. And that over the years, that Save the Rhino Trust, SRT, has it's grown. It now has about sort of 18, 20 trackers. There is the partnership with a lovely lodge that you can go and stay at and go out tracking rhinos on foot, which is an awesome experience. I have to say, rhinos look a lot bigger on foot than when you're in a vehicle.
And far more intimidating.
Exactly. But then in the last 10 years, Save the Rhino Trust has expanded its Rhino Ranger programs, because it's got, fewer than 20 people who are trying to patrol an area that's 25,000 square kilometers. And clearly that's not doable. So what they've done is to work with the communal conservancies, the traditional leadership groups, and communities settled throughout that landscape, to train up some of local people to become rhino trackers. They then work for local lodges, for community campsites. So they're like a force multiplier, and they are seeing that they can take tourists out on safari. They can show them rhinos. They can talk to them about the history of individual animals, because they know them by name. They know them individually. And you're therefore seeing the benefits from tourism accrue directly back to those communities. And that kind of model is being, or that approach rather, is being replicated in other rhino areas, because if you don't have the support of the communities who live in and around your rhino areas, you might as well give up. And I think makes an interesting contrast with Kruger National Park, which, for years has been the stronghold of rhinos. Huge populations, sort of, it was up to about 16,000 white rhinos, and the figures now are maybe half of that because of the poaching crisis. And I wonder, some of that, I think, it was a very militaristic approach that was adopted in Kruger when the poaching crisis arrived there. It was very much about helicopters and dogs and guns and rangers. And all around the borders of Kruger National Park, Greg, I think you've spent time at Timbavati, for example, there are other private and community reserves. And of course, they are also being attacked by poachers if they can't find animals in Kruger. And I think there's a real lesson there that you have to take your neighbors with you, and you have to think beyond the boundaries of the protected area. You've really got to work with all the different stakeholder groups to find out what the impact is of living next to a wildlife area, and to try to solve some of the problems, whether that's elephants and crop raiding or predator livestock conflict. I think some areas have got on top of that better. You talked about Lewa and Barana and Olpejeta in Kenya. I think they are pretty advanced in terms of their community relations, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I do. I mean, even in Kruger, there's been an enormous shift towards community relations. I mean, you just go to those, particularly the private reserves around it. They're all involved in the community in some way, shape, or form. They've all got, you drive through and it's a school sponsored by such and such, and a clinic or something that the staff are all there. I think the scale of the problem in Kruger, because of the scale and the size of the area that they're trying to conserve, because you've got Mozambicans coming through on the other side, and that is a whole nother issue in itself, is kind of why they've sort of had to sort of target in almost a military way to start off. It's national. It's a national interest. And they've always had, along that border, there's always been a military presence, trying to stop people sort of jumping the fence and trying to get into South Africa in the first place. So yeah, and I think everywhere. I've just come back from Shishluyo and which I've been fortunate enough to go to for many years, and the presence of security personnel through helicopters and rangers on motorbikes and etc. is extraordinary. I've never seen it like that, which is a positive thing. I think the difficulty there lies, you've got that enormous wilderness area in the south, I think it's 30,000 hectares, where there's nothing in there, and makes it a sort of playground, so to speak, for a poacher, because it's very hard for the sort of law enforcement to actually get in and control it. But I think, to go back to your question, I think everyone is engaging, some more successfully than others. I think for me, the sort of overriding thing is that there's got to be some form of interest or ownership or something tangible to those local communities, whereby they understand that by preserving this, they are going to benefit enormously. The frightening thing from a Kruger perspective, and I keep bouncing back to that, but I've been up there a lot, is the population pressure and growth on that boundary is astounding. I don't know when last you were up there, but literally you've got kind of an urban conurbation, so to speak, from Nelspruit to just short of Hoedspruit, and all the little towns along the way, your Acorn Hook and et cetera, that were tiny little villages and what have you, are now just one big urban sprawl. As communities have grown and done better, and they can now put a house up where they had a little hut, but also the population explosion, and that in itself, when you've got a large population on the side of a big national reserve, who are largely impoverished and are upskilling and being educated and growing immensely from where they were even 20 years ago, it's still a long way to go, and it creates these kind of conflicts that we talk about. But yeah, I do agree. I think that there's a lot that has to be done. Some are doing it better than others, and I think that community-based partnerships are the key to the survival of wildlife in general. It doesn't matter where you are on Earth. If you want that to survive and to not be used, it's opportunity cost at the end of the day. Simple economics. Your cost of the best foregone alternative. I've never forgotten that from my economics 101 back in the day. But it really is as simple as that, is that, will wildlife pay, or could I put a cow in the same area and make more money out of it? And that is the sort of key and fundamental to solving this crisis. And I think people are doing amazing work and an amazing role in servicing that, but we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, it's what you were saying about sort of large protected areas and that pressure from urban development and so on. That's interesting work being done in Kenya to expand rhino range from Lewa. So there are these 4 areas that have got rhinos at the moment. There are plans for others to come on board and to get rhino populations. And then there's even a longer term plan to try to build an entire arc of connected areas where wildlife can wander freely with elephant corridors and so on. But it involves that kind of land use planning that you've got to do with all the stakeholders to make sure that there's areas for livestock, for agriculture, for human settlement, and there's still room for wildlife. And you've got to have that really big picture view and to be able to think in terms of decades rather than just what have we got to do in the next sort of 6 months. I wanted just to say how grateful Save the Rhino is for your support during the last 10 years. I mean, it's worth over $20,000 so far. And actually going forward, I think you're changing the model slightly. I understand that it's going to be a straight $10 donation for every couple who books a safari through Mahlatini Luxury Travel, which is amazing. Thank you very much. And I wanted to say it's been so helpful to have this unrestricted income. By unrestricted, I mean you give our trustees the freedom to determine how those funds are spent. And it means that we've been able to respond to some difficult to fund projects or things that sort of donors don't naturally warm to, perhaps. And one of those projects that we've funded from our core funds, from our unrestricted funds, we're super excited about. It is an ongoing follow the money investigation taking place in South Africa, where we're working with KPMG, the accountant auditsy firm, on it's called Project Blood Orange, is its code name. And we've made 16 pretty key arrests, including 2 senior rangers working in Kruger National Park, that we've found as a result of the investigation. The court case will be in early 2024. But there was a significant drop in poaching in Kruger after the arrests of just those 2 individuals. So it's kind of become rather obvious how implicated they were in poaching. I can't say much more about it, but it's just we were able to give £20,000, $60,000 from our own core funds towards that. And then I got money from other sources. But it's lovely to have these spare funds so that we can make those kind of grants. And thank you very much indeed for that.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. You know, it's been a wonderful partnership. It's something that, like you say, we started 10 years ago when we were looking for sort of like-minded, charitable business that were looking to do similar things to us. You know, you mentioned earlier our 3 sustainability pillars. And you guys fit straight into that. And the biggest thing is that you guys do what you say on the tin, for lack of a better word. You know, it's really key that you are you're visible. You know, every year from when I was in my London days watching crazy people running in a rhino suit on the London Marathon to your various ad campaigns and bits and pieces were just astounding. And the fact that you guys are making this huge impact on the ground has been a huge inspiration for us. And certainly we are thrilled to be working with you on that. In terms of funds and where they go, you know, your history and your the way you guys run your incredible organization, you know, shows that you know things are going to the right places, and we have every faith with you that where they are spent is in the right place. So more than happy with the way things are being done at the moment.
Thank you. And well, just think it, I like that does what it says on the tin, Save the Rhino International. That's a good segue into my sort of one of my closing questions, which is that we don't just work with the 2 Africa. I know we've spent most of the time talking about the black and the white species of rhino in Africa. Of course, we also work in Indonesia with Sumatran and Javan rhinos. And we also work with greater one-horn rhinos, which are found in India and Nepal. And I understand that Mahlatini is going to be launching some safaris to India in the coming 12 months. Is that right?
Yes, it's been a very exciting project that's been a long time coming. We actually started it pre-COVID and then got kind of popped on the back burner for a while, and we've just been finding our feet for the last couple of years, and we feel we're now ready to initiate that. So yeah, watch this space. We will be going into to India, Nepal, Bhutan in the next sort of 6 to 10 months, and we're extremely excited. Yeah, I think it's a wonderful thing that we can partner up again and look to expand certainly our product offering from that, but also you know, the areas that we look to. It's very key to us to be selling destinations where we can offer those sustainability pillars, and that, you know, we can offer something very different in terms of those regions to what you get in Africa, and be able to give our clients a very rounded experience and something totally different. So yeah, we're looking forward to that, and looking forward to working with you guys on a few of those projects as well. So yeah, exciting times.
It's gosh, I visited Kazaranga National Park way back in 2003, and it's a rhino viewing experience quite unlike Africa. I remember going up one of those watchtowers, and I looked and counted 34 rhinos that I could see in one swoop. It's
Oh my word.
yeah, a lot of photos. So I think you'll have some
Yeah.
very happy clients. It's a stunning country. So yeah.
We look
Greg,
forward to it.
I don't know, is there anything else you wanted to say just now?
No, really just an ending. Just, it's been a great privilege to work with you guys for 10 years. We're thrilled with our partnership. We really do feel that you guys make an enormous difference on the ground where it counts. Yeah, we look forward to many, many more years of working closely together, and even more closely together in our quest to save this wonderful animal, and make sure that our children and our children's children can go out and experience wildlife like we have, and that these amazing keystone species are there and protected for the future.
Thank you, Greg. And I mean, the COVID pandemic made it just how clear how valuable tourism for wildlife conservation. So many of the field programs really suffered during the 2-year no travel period, and we're absolutely delighted that to have Mahlatini as one of our lovely corporate partners. Thanks for everything you do.
It's been a great pleasure, and thank you.